Unless you're the city of Oakwood, economic development is something that's near and dear to the hearts of probably most communities. It's their lifeblood because they generate income tax dollars from employers. So we thought we'd look at this from two different perspectives. So we've got two very talented speakers today. Amber Holloway. Amber's the city manager of West Carrollton, and Julie Sullivan works for the Dayton Development Coalition. Amber is going to look at economic development from like a more localized perspective, and Julie's going to give us maybe a more regional perspective on economic development. So let me just tell you a little bit about Amber. As I mentioned, she is the new city manager at West Carrollton. She has a bachelor's degree from Ohio State, and Mr. Duncan, she is another graduate of the MPA program at Wright State University. I think she's about the fourth or fifth one. Yeah. Before coming to West Carrollton, Amber served 6 years as the assistant city manager for Vandalia, where she played a pivotal role in advancing economic development initiatives. In addition, she helped the city secure more than $1.5 million in grant funding to support business growth and managed other significant projects, including the rewrite of Vandalia's planning and zoning codes, comprehensive plan, and city rebranding. Amber is the president-elect of the Ohio City Management Association and also serves on Wright State University MPA Advisory Board. Julie Sullivan is a graduate of UD and joined the Dayton Development Coalition in 2014. She's currently the Executive Vice President of Regional Development and is responsible for establishing regional priorities and execution of strategies to support those priorities in collaboration with public, private, and nonprofit partners aimed at growing the region's economic base. I'm sure your grade school English teacher probably wouldn't like that sentence, but that's how it was printed up. Yeah. Prior to joining the Dayton Development Coalition, Julie was the Director of Business Development for the Downtown Dayton Partnership. She's been recognized by the Dayton Business Journal as a 40 under 40, one of the top 25 women to watch, and a Power 50 female business leader. She was also named one of the top 50 economic development officials in the United States. And like most of these accomplished professionals, she serves on a lot of various boards and committees throughout the region. So we're very pleased to have with us Amber and Julie, and I think Amber is going to go first.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to present here, co-present with Julie Sullivan, who is just an exceptional economic development leader in our region. So we talk about economic development a lot, right? It's this is a hot topic. This is a phrase that we're all using, but what does it really mean? And so when we look, I wanted to look up the definitions of economic development. So one definition from the Cambridge Dictionary says, it's the process in which an economy grows or changes and becomes more advanced, especially when both economic and social conditions are improved. The U.S. Economic Development Administration defines economic development as something that creates the conditions for economic growth and improved quality of life by expanding the capacity of individuals, firms, and communities to maximize the use of their talents and skills to support innovation, lower transaction costs, and responsibly produce and trade valuable goods and services. Is your head spinning? Yeah. That's a lot, right? But essentially, economic development is about improving quality of life in your communities through job creation and investment. But we aren't just looking for jobs, are we? We're also looking for the right fit in each of our respective communities. So what works in one place may not work in another. And I will tell you that in this region, we do economic development very, very well. We are exceptional at it. We have great, and this is due in part to the leaders within your local communities, as well as our regional partners, which includes the Dayton Development Coalition. So when we think about economic development locally, businesses obviously are vital to our communities, but why? They create jobs, they spur investment, they're a source of pride, and they also create gathering spaces. I mean, think about the local coffee shop where a lot of business can get done in a coffee shop. A lot can be learned from the people that are there. So this is all scalable, right? It's not just your big manufacturing company that's bringing in 200 plus jobs. Those are really important, but it's also the small businesses as well that folks are interacting with each and every day. So businesses generate income tax revenue, which is a significant portion of many municipalities' budgets. This is how we provide services. Do I have any folks that are representing townships today? Okay. So in townships, you typically aren't levying an income tax, at least in the state of Ohio, and so that part isn't as vital, but businesses are still really vital to the success of the community. So again, businesses small and large are vital, and it's not all about tax revenue and how we incentivize development. We obviously want our communities to be great places to live, work, and play. So those businesses need to kind of fit into the fabric of where we each see our respective communities going and where you as elected leaders want the community to go. But businesses' investments are also local and site-specific selections. So when a business decides it's going to locate in your community, there are so many factors that they look at. And some of those factors are, how the community looks, the amenities, the housing stock, the available workforce, the site in question. They're also paying attention to what's going on in your local governments. So, I always say that every employee, whether they know it or not, if you're representing, and this includes elected officials representing local government organizations, has a role in economic development within the community. Some roles are more pronounced and obvious than others. So if we think about it, if our utility services aren't operating appropriately, that impacts our businesses just as it does our residents, sometimes even more so. If the condition of our roadways, our amenities, et cetera, are all maintained and managed by our respective organizations and the folks that work within the organization. These are things that businesses notice, whether they're already in your community or they're considering locating in your community. You want to present a good image. And then also, as elected leaders, where do you come into this? You want to present a connected and coherent voice about your community. So you want your businesses and your residents to know that you've got a high-performing organization, that staff is available to help. And we'll get into that a little bit here. But, when you see businesses out in the community as elected leaders, some of these business folks may recognize you even if you don't recognize them, right? Because your pictures are on websites and hopefully you can develop a relationship. But it's super important that when you see folks in the community, if you're approached by them or you see them and want to approach them, that you're conveying support from the city as an organization or municipality or jurisdiction, township, whoever you represent, that you're offering up your support, your concern for how they're doing and if they're being successful within your community and what can be done to help them. And while you can't promise them the farm, right, as the elected leaders, you can't promise them incentives and things of that nature unless you convene the elected body to do so. But what you can do is you can tag in your manager, right, and you can say, hey, I'm going to call on Mr. Tilton, one of my bosses here, and I'll say that, let's say Mr. Tilton is enjoying a nice evening at El Mason. He's having a great time. He's approached by a business leader in the community. They're chit-chatting. Everything's great, just having a normal conversation. But he says, hey, Keith, I'm really having some trouble here with workforce. I just can't hire folks. I'm looking for engineers or I'm looking for just laborers. Everything's going great, but that's kind of what's going on. then Mr. Tilton might say to that business owner, hey, you know, certainly understand that's something, you know, that I've heard a lot of, and I want to connect you to our city manager. You know, she may have some resources for you. And so by doing that, you can liaise between the city and, you know, between city staff and the business organization to help them, you know, create connection, right? And remind them that we care as organizations and that we want to help and we're there to help. So at the end of the day, your jurisdiction staff and you as elected leaders, I think we share a common value, and that is that we all want to make our communities a better place. And so just keep that in mind, you know, as economic development opportunities come up. So economic development is really a relationship-based business. And this relationship-based business is free, right? And I just talked about a way that you can connect with businesses through relationships as you're out and about within your respective communities. But another way is through business retention and expansion visits. So these are most likely going on, depending on your level of staffing within your respective jurisdictions, but these are likely going on in a calculated way, meaning that staff is looking to go out and meet with businesses. Those types of visits are generally sit down 30, 40 minutes, let's go through. Are you experiencing any challenges? Where's your current workforce? It's a great way to check in, and depending on the size of your community and the number of businesses that you have, those are probably occurring on a rotating basis, anywhere from every year to every 3 years. But the idea is that you make those continual connections and try to keep the door open so that if your businesses are having challenges, they're reaching out to your staff members and feel comfortable doing that in order to, you know, facilitate some help or idea sharing, what have you. And then there's other ways that you can connect with businesses as well. These are super important. Some of these might look like, you know, for instance, in West Carrollton, we sponsor the Big Hoopla event each year. That's an amazing event, but it's a way that we can share basketball tickets to the first 4 games with our business community, right? And in Vandalia, where I know Miss Dugan is from, you have the Dayton Air Show, and there's a partnership there to bring business community out to the air show, treat them to a nice time. Obviously, all this is budget dependent, and there's ways that you can do this from a little bit of money to not a lot. But at the end of the day, businesses want to know that you as elected leaders and that the organization cares. So there's some tools. There are many tools in economic development, and I'm going to talk about 3 local tools with you. And these are drivers of economic development in our respective communities. So the first is a community reinvestment area. I'm sure many of you have heard of this, commonly referred to just simply as a CRA. It is a direct incentive tax exemption program that benefits property owners who renovate or construct new buildings. These have generally been established in areas where investment has lacked. Many communities already have these in place. And it is possible that you can create new ones. So they generally encompass a sizable area. You don't typically see these just on a parcel basis. These are likely across several to 100 acres plus. So there are 2 types of CRAs. The first that I'll talk about is a pre-1994 CRA. This is enacted by a legislative authority before 1994. Pre-94 CRAs are often seen as most desirable by businesses. And I want you to hear me when I say by businesses, right? So CRAs, they provide a 100% real tax exemption on real property improvements. So what that means is that if a business locates in a pre-1994 CRA, the city or municipality does not have the ability to negotiate anything up to 100%. It is strictly 100% abatement. So what that looks like is that, say you have a vacant parcel of industrial land, a business moves in, they develop the property, they will still pay taxes on what the land value was at the time of construction, but they will not pay on the improvement value for up to 15 years. And that's depending on the legislation as well as the type of development that occurs. Now, the post-94 CRA is anything enacted after July of 1994, and that provides up to 100% exemption. So that's where cities, municipalities in general, local government jurisdictions, I apologize, city government is deeply ingrained in me, so I apologize to townships, villages for continuing to use that phrase, but this applies to everybody. So it can provide up to 100%, and you have the ability to negotiate that. So there is the ability to convert pre-94 CRAs into post-94 CRAs. That has positives and negatives. So on the pre-94 CRA, again, those are seen as most desirable by businesses, but the post-94 also have a lot of utility and are a great incentive as well. It just gives the cities there's a little bit more control that's already built in.
So on the post-1994, you can go up to as many years as you want, or is there a year limitation?
No, I'm sorry, there is a 15-year limitation, yes. And again, 15 years is going to be on the industrial and commercial side. Typically on residential, you're going to see more like 12 years, but you can set that within the legislation as well. So both of those are up to 15 years. One is up to 100% versus a mandatory 100%. So the next thing that I'll talk about is tax increment financing. And so this tax increment financing is one of those that's a little bit more difficult to contextualize. So I included a graphic here today, but realistically, it's just a tool that governments can use to fund public infrastructure improvements within their jurisdictions. It locks in the value of the real property within the TIF at the time the legislation was approved. TIF payments capture the increased value of the property, and that money stays within your community for public infrastructure improvements. Those public infrastructure improvements have to be defined at the time that the TIF is enacted. So for instance, if you say there's a key intersection that is maybe not even within the TIF boundary, but it funnels into the TIF boundary, you may describe that intersection that, if this development occurs, we're going to need to, to funnel some money to improve this intersection. So all of that is already set in stone. What it does at its most simple level is divert the property taxes that would have otherwise, I'll use the phrase, go downtown, right, to fund your county services, your libraries, etc. It keeps it in your community. And when I say that, a lot of the reaction is, well, why don't we just TIF everything, right? Well, that's, you want to use TIF strategically and appropriately, and we also rely, these organizations that fund critical services, for instance, the county, right, is providing economic development support. The libraries are providing support within our community. The county has the auditor's office. There's many services that are funded through property taxes, and so you don't want to funnel all of the money away. You want to use those types of things appropriately. And often residential projects are ineligible, and that's because you have to be able to prove that the TIF would be impacting a blighted area. So again, there's just two types of TIFs. There's a general purpose parcel TIF and an incentive district TIF. Those can go up to 300 acres in size. If you're a community over 25,000, there's a little bit different regulations there. My experience with TIFs has been in communities under $25,000, so I'm not an expert in that side of things, but TIFs can be in place for up to 30 years. And that is if you have the concurrence of the school district, meaning that you're working in tandem with the schools and making an effort to make them whole through the process. And then finally, the third tool that I'll talk to you about briefly here is community improvement corporations. These are defined by the Ohio Revised Code as an economic development corporation or a county land reutilization corporation. If you're within Montgomery County, the land bank is a community improvement corporation under ORC. I think it's 1724. One of the biggest benefits that CICs have within respective local government jurisdictions is that they can allow you to purchase and hold property and as well as sell it, and it takes this kind of out of the city's hand, though it is an arm of the city. It's established, in that manner. That is one of the biggest benefits. And so we have tools like that at the county level. but it can be a big benefit. They can also administer grant programs, but you can also do that at the local level. So this is one of those tools where it does require, you to stand up a board, as well as potential funding and things of that nature. So that's not going to be necessarily achievable with every community, depending on your staff and the ability to do that, but they can be great tools. And then at the local level, at its most simple level, you can choose to fund economic development through your annual budgets. This can be through donations to your community improvement corporation if you have one or you're considering one, or you can simply fund grant programs as the city. For instance, facade improvement grants that may improve signage, might improve help people paint their buildings, things of that nature, and then small bit like business grant programs, which were very, very popular in local jurisdictions throughout COVID and when communities received American Rescue Plan Act funds. But it's important that as you consider incentives for businesses, that you balance the return on investment with respect to incentives. And so you want to bring value to the community, and sometimes that's not always job creation and income tax dollars. Sometimes it's benefiting the community in other ways, whether it's opening up a recreation opportunity or creating a gathering space in your local coffee shop, which isn't really generating a ton of income tax, but it's a great value to the community. So those are things that you'd want to think about. And then I'll tee it up for Julie here by saying that we have so many great resource partners within especially if you're in Montgomery County, those are the ones I'm most familiar with, but I know not all of you are within Montgomery County. But I'll say Ohio does this really, really well, and it's very intentional. We have great resource partners. I'm going to name two: Montgomery County Department of Community and Economic Development. They assist local communities with business retention and expansion visits. This is a great service that the county provides because if you're anything like in West Carrollton, we're a community of 13,000 people. We have an economic development director who is part-time. He cannot possibly get to every business, and so we can help tag team that with the county. We can also do that with the Dayton Development Coalition as well. The county also has the EDGE grant program, which can help us bring resources in when our businesses are looking to build, expand, or we're looking to attract a new business. And we also have the Business First program, which I believe bleeds beyond county lines, and that's a really great program which says, hey, as local jurisdictions, we're not out to poach each other's businesses, so we're not going to go out and have meetings with your businesses without telling our counterpart in that other community so that they have a chance to retain them. Sometimes that's not possible, but it's great to give that professional courtesy, and that's something that I think we all appreciate. The Dayton Development Coalition also assists with BR&E visits, and they help us, and they have specific sectors that they like to target, but also, and I'm sure Julie will talk a little bit about this, but they really can help identify areas, and sometimes businesses reach right out to the county or to the Dayton Development Coalition, and so it really takes all of us to make it work. And then they also assist with national site selectors, so we get a chance to get our land and properties in front of companies that are maybe even international or on the national level are looking at Ohio to locate. It's a huge opportunity, and they help us with the data that we need to submit for that. And they also run our local PDAC process. But Julie's going to tell you a lot more about that. Is there any questions that I can answer for you? Yes.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. Just a question about all the different economic development tools. Are those defined by the Ohio Revised Code? Do they only apply to property tax, or can they also apply to property tax?
Specifically on the community reinvestment area and the TIFs, those are going to be property tax based. And yes, they are established by the Ohio Revised Code. If you go to the Ohio Development Services Agency, you can learn more about both. They have kind of a two-pager on both community reinvestment areas and TIFs that is pretty simple to understand and kind of builds on what I've told you today. Any other questions? Yes.
I've had to learn about TIFs from my community and use the term be made whole, school systems be made whole. Could you explain
Sure, that's always a hot topic. But with respect to being made, there's non-school TIFs, right, where you're simply saying the school is going to be made whole, so that whatever the school would have earned from that development, they're then getting the TIF revenue from that to be, so like let's say the school gets 60% of the property tax value. I'm throwing a percentage out there, I think I'm a little bit off. But they would then receive that same amount of money. So as the city is getting money in from the TIF, the city would then make a payment out to the school for what they would have earned from that money.
Okay.
Yes. Or jurisdiction, yes.
Maybe piggyback on this, but does the law stipulate that the schools need to be made whole?
There's different structures for TIFs. So you can choose to negotiate. Sometimes you might negotiate a lesser amount for the schools with your TIF legislation. And in other cases, specifically on 30-year TIFs, a lot of them end up being non-school type of TIFs where you're saying we're going to make the school whole on this. But in reality, you're still capturing a lot of revenue back to the local community, and so it can be a huge benefit to fund infrastructure improvements. Okay. Any other questions before I turn it over to Julie? Okay.
Thanks, Amber. Okay, great introduction. Thanks, Amber. So I was saying earlier to Andrew Rodney before he left that I was really glad that Jay asked Amber and I to present together because economic development is absolutely a team sport, and it takes everybody involved to really be successful in the effort. And I think that's, Amber mentioned that she feels like our region and in Ohio we're really, really good at economic development. I feel the same way. And it's been a long time in the making. It really does require us to be very collaborative in our work in order to be this successful. So kudos to all of you, your community staffs, because they really do lift us up as we work on behalf of an entire region, and I'll talk more about that. So I didn't want to assume that everybody knew the Dayton Development Coalition, so I thought I'd spend just a couple of quick minutes getting you familiar. We are a nonprofit economic development group. We were stood up in the mid-90s as an initiative out of the Dayton Business Committee to specifically focus on the region's growth and champion the interests specifically of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'll touch on that a little bit. Our mission is we're not creating jobs directly, but we exist to cause to create jobs. So in partnership with local communities, in partnership with organizations at a state level, we're working to create an environment where companies can continue to create jobs and invest capital in our region. As an organization, we definitely consider ourselves to be servant leaders and really try and abide by that in the work that we do. So our region is defined here on the map. It's probably too small to read, but it's about 12 counties. We often work in the northern parts of Warren and Butler counties as well. Anybody that's kind of above US 63 tends to assimilate with the Dayton region, and the folks that are below that are more in the Cincinnati market. So we often work with communities that are in the northern parts of Warren and Butler County, but for all intents and purposes, we're about 12 counties that we cover. As I mentioned, we exist to catalyze job creation. And we do the work of supporting that in three main areas that I'll touch on through these slides. So our partnership with Jobs Ohio as the state's economic development organization. So that's your traditional economic development work. The things that Amber talked about, where we are getting together with businesses on a very regular basis to see what needs do you have, how do we create an environment for you to be successful, and how do we do that attraction of new companies and investment into the region. We also do this through advocacy efforts, not only with you locally, but also with our state delegation, and then also at a federal level. And our federal work is actually pretty significant because it ties into the third leg of the stool, which is the support for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We have this specific emphasis on the aerospace and defense industry because Wright Pat is such a significant driver, not only for the region, but for the state of Ohio. So we leverage these 3 initiatives, and really what this comes down to is support for businesses as they're looking to create jobs and invest capital, connecting them with the resources that they need to be successful, whether those are financial, or they could be workforce related, or they could be supplier based. There's all sorts of different connections that can be made to help companies continue to be successful. Attracting new investments through our business development efforts as we go out and talk about what it's like to do business in the region, across the country and around the world, where we're looking to attract new to come in. And then again, that support for military and federal installations to continue to grow Wright-Patterson. So Amber mentioned about local ecosystems and how economic development can be not just your Main Street small businesses, but also large industry. For the purposes of the Dayton Development Coalition, we're focused on these industry sectors, so we're going to be more geared towards your larger employers. But there are a lot of very small businesses that are tucked away in your individual communities that fall into these sectors as well. And more so now than we ever have before, we are looking for opportunities to lift those small companies up as well. We've added more tools to the toolbox that give us the ability to do that, but primarily we're looking at companies that fall in these industry sectors. So the economic development side of what we do. I mentioned about being a partner to Jobs Ohio. So Jobs Ohio, if you're not familiar with that organization, was stood up 2010, 2011 timeframe under then Governor Kasich. And his goal was to privatize economic development on behalf of the state in order to work more cohesively with private industry. So the idea was if you create a separate entity and give it the ability to work with its own funding for the long term, then you can work in confidential situations with businesses where they may be looking to make strategic decisions that they don't necessarily want the rest of the world to find out about until the right time comes. So we can work in confidence with companies in this structure. And also they created a unique funding mechanism. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but Jobs Ohio purchased a lease on Ohio's liquor enterprise. So at the moment, Jobs Ohio runs Ohio Liquor. And what they do through that mechanism is they run the business and take care of the revenues. At the end of the year, they settle up whatever revenue is made off of that enterprise. A significant portion of it goes right back into the liquor business to keep it going. A portion of it is taken off and put into the state's general fund, but there's also a segment of that revenue that is used for economic development purposes. So I'll talk a little bit about the programs that they fund through those revenues. Oh, and we're one of 6 organizations that you see up here on the map. So we cover about 12 counties, and then we have 5 counterpart organizations across the state. Okay, so in our work to support companies, Amber touched a little bit on local incentives. There are also incentives available at a state level. And typically, when we're evaluating who might be eligible for this, the basics of the criteria are how many net new jobs are being created within the state, what's the payroll associated with those jobs, and we're looking more and more closely at payroll now than we ever did before. So what's the quality of the job that's being created, and then also what's the fixed asset investment that goes with it. And these are really the same fundamental criteria that your local communities are going to be using when they evaluate, can we leverage our CRA? Can we leverage our TIF? Do we want to offer a small business grant to go along with some of these state programs that are available? So typically in economic development, doesn't matter if you're at local, county, regional or state level, you're typically looking at the same foundational criteria to evaluate eligibility for incentives. So listed here are the primary incentive categories that Jobs Ohio has available through their funding. It's not limited to this. There are several more, but these are the ones that are our major go-tos. And I mentioned that the criteria is jobs, payroll, and capital investment. You'll see these programs are meant to address those needs. So your economic development grant and your growth fund loan are going to go towards fixed asset investment and offsetting those costs. Workforce training and a talent acquisition is to address the people side of things. Based on your needs, the types of jobs that you'll be bringing on board, do you feel like, based on the information we've provided you, that the folks coming in your door are going to be properly trained? Do you need assistance with that? Do you have existing employees that might need to go through the same training? So we can leverage some of these funds to help offset the investments company make to get their people ready. And these are programs that, again, are funded through Jobs Ohio. So it's a separate funding mechanism than state monies. But we also use state money when we look to do economic development incentives. So the Ohio Department of Development is the state agency, and they have a wide variety of responsibilities, economic development being a small piece of that. And the two primary economic development tools that we leverage in our work are listed here. So the Ohio Job Creation Tax Credit and the road work funds that are outlined here. So although Jobs Ohio was created to be the economic development organization on behalf of the state, there's still a state agency behind that as a partner that has funding mechanisms available that we leverage in this work. So I think the easiest way to think about it is that Jobs Ohio is going to be the face of Ohio, the marketing mechanism, the business development entity that is going out talking about what it's like to do business in Ohio and encouraging companies to expand in Ohio, bring those opportunities back, evaluate whether or not they can provide any of their own funding, and make recommendations to the state of Ohio and Ohio Department of Development about whether or not they want to apply incentives. The tax credit is a great program, and oftentimes local communities will create a local job tax credit to kind of mirror this program, but it's not by any means a requirement. So this tax credit is a rebate back to the company on the income taxes that they pay to the state of Ohio at a certain percentage rate for a period of time. And the beauty of this particular program is it's performance-based, so there's no cap. So if a company's creating 100 jobs, they'll get a rebate on those. But if over the course of their project they're wildly successful and they create 1,000 jobs, they get credit for 1,000 jobs. So this is far and away one of the best tools that we have available. And the great thing is Ohio's not giving anything away that they didn't already have, because it's net new income tax revenue to the state. They're just rebating that net new back for a period of time. The other program that we like to encourage is the roadwork development funds, because actually this program benefits communities. So it's on behalf of a company that may be doing an expansion that would catalyze some roadwork improvements to be made. Maybe there's a new turn lane that's needed. Maybe there's a traffic signal that's required. Anything that would be related to improving flow of traffic, life and safety, et cetera, we can advocate for roadwork funds, and those are awarded to the community on behalf of the project that's creating jobs. We couple all of these different state-level incentive programs with anything that the community can do locally. So again, it's really important that the state, the region, and the local communities are working closely together to support companies, because we each have a role to play and we want to present it as one cohesive package to try and attract their investment. So this chart gives you an idea of the growth that our region has experienced over about a 10 or 12 year period, and through our economic development efforts in particular. This is by far and away not all of the job creation and capital investment that takes place, but these are the results of economic development efforts in particular. So there's a whole other grouping of job creation and capital that takes place even without our involvement. It's been consistent over this period of time. Typically on any given year, we're creating somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 new jobs through these efforts. But 21, 22, and surprisingly 23 were definitely anomaly years that we're very, very happy about. Since we've come out of COVID, the region has experienced really significant success in growth, and specifically in jobs and capital investment. They're record years for us. We've never seen numbers like this before. It's been really exciting work. 23, I had no idea would be such a great year for us, but it turned out to be our second highest year in job creation and capital investment. And I think this speaks a lot to the success that Ohio has seen coming out of COVID. Intel brought a lot of attention to Ohio. Honda's investment in our region brought a lot of attention to Ohio. That, coupled with companies looking to reshore their operations as a result of COVID, and looking to the Midwest as a very safe, economical place to do business. So we have benefited greatly from the interest to reshore and bring supply chains closer in. And we continue to see that level of activity. I really don't know what to expect out of 2024. We don't have a large project that we're currently working on, but the pipeline is full. I think we'll have a lot of smaller projects come through this year. Amber mentioned about our team supporting local communities on site selection projects and the request for information that goes along with that. Once a company has requested information from us about particular sites, they typically come back and decide which communities they want to visit. And we've been bombarded with site visits so far this year, so it's really exciting. We actually have 4 site visits this week, 2 of which are foreign companies. So there's a lot of really great activity that continues to take place. So it's really important that we continue to work together because it's going to take everybody to win these successes.
Did you have a question for me?
Yes, please.
What's a typical and a minimum project size that you would get engaged in at a regional level, like a city like?
That's a good question. There's not really a typical project, and there's not necessarily a minimum threshold. For the Dayton region, I would say in general, because we are a community made up of small and medium-sized businesses, I'll use a sports analogy, we're typically landing singles, doubles, and triples. Some of the bigger markets like Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland often have projects that are much larger than what we see in our region. But I would say that our bread and butter project is somewhere between 50 and 150 new jobs. Capital investments all over the board right now because people are going through automation and things like that. So it's hard to say what a typical capital investment would look like. But I think for us, somewhere between 50 and 150 or 200 jobs per project is probably what we see the most of. But they're all over the board. I mean, you know, I mentioned earlier we're starting to work with much smaller companies because we have new tools in the toolbox to do that. So we're now working with companies that are creating 1 job. Joby Aviation pledged to create 2,000 jobs. So it's all over the board, and they probably all require just about the same amount of effort, regardless of whether it's 1 job or 2,000. Does that help?
It does help, actually.
What I think is really exciting about the economic development work that we get to do is that I can look across an entire region and see the growth. We have projects all over this 12-county footprint. So what that says to me is it doesn't matter where you go in this region, you can be very, very successful. You don't necessarily have to be close in Montgomery County where more of your built environments, your urban environments are. You can go out in the hinterlands in God's country in Mercer County or even Fayette County and find a really quality workforce and make a great investment and be successful and continue to grow over time. So I always like to look at this map and see, are we catalyzing investment all across our region? Are we creating quality job opportunities across our region? And are we hitting on a variety of different industry sectors across this region? So when we think about resiliency, I think of it in terms of various different wage levels so that individuals can move up and through a career over time. I think about a variety of industry sectors so that we're not reliant on just automotive like we were at one time. We're looking at up to 10 different industry sectors that we want to diversify across our region. And then the other piece of it is, are we creating opportunity all across this 12-county footprint? Because it's a very commutable region, which is very different than other parts of Ohio. You can live in Montgomery County and work in Mercer, and it's really only a 1 hour, up to a 1 hour commute. So this is really great for us to see as well, and I think protects us from some downturns over time. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, harken back to these 3 focus areas: our mission to cause to create jobs and capital investment. And what I want to do is talk about it just a little bit in the context of our support for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and why that's so important. So like the work that we do every day with private industry employers in conjunction with local communities, we do the same for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the really tremendous network of defense contractors that support them in their missions. So why is Wright-Pat so important to this region? Because not only is it the major economic engine for the Dayton region, generating about $16 billion in economic activity every year, but it's the state's largest single site employer. So it's easy to see the significant growth that's demonstrated here over the course of several years. If you can see it, I know it's kind of small, on the jobs chart, you'll notice that Wright-Pat's employment ticked up at a time where not only our region was suffering from a lot of private sector job loss, but the entire nation was going through a recession. So that 2005 to 2007 timeframe where GM's closing its operations, Delphi is closing its operations, NCR decides to pull out of Dayton, and we're in a national recession. Frankly, if we didn't have Wright-Patterson to offset that, where they're experiencing job growth, I think we could probably kind of roll up our sidewalks and go home. So we're very lucky to have this as a major economic driver in our region, and we want to make sure that we are always mindful of the opportunity for growth with Wright-Pat, because I think it helps, that actually adds to the resiliency of the region as well. There are a lot of missions that are headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That's another reason why it's so valuable to the community. So on behalf of the entire Air Force across the world, we have several missions within there that are headquartered here. National Air and Space Intelligence Center, Life Cycle Management Center, Air Force Materiel Command, Air Force Research Labs, et cetera, et cetera. This is a really big deal. So the brain trust of the United States Air Force is in Dayton, Ohio. It is so awesome. And we're always looking for opportunities to help them grow, just like we do private industry. The third piece of the tool is advocacy. The advocacy work that we do really was born out of trying to protect and help grow Wright-Patterson, but it has gone much beyond that over time. The two primary advocacy initiatives that we have under the Dayton Development Coalition are, Amber mentioned, Priority Development and Advocacy Committee, PDAC, which is a mechanism by which the regional community prioritizes projects on behalf of the region, and then we use that prioritized list of projects to present to our legislators at the state level and then also at a federal level when we go to our community leader fly-in in DC, which is coming up in May. The fly-in is an annual event. We've been doing it about 40 years. I think this might be year 40. As I mentioned, it's a complement to the PDAC process. It's an opportunity for the region to speak with one voice to our federal delegation about the things that are really important to the region. And we typically have about 150 attendees. This year we actually have 200. Other communities across the country have programs like this, but ours is so well attended, so well orchestrated. Our federal delegation members are constantly beating the drum that you guys do it right. This is exactly what we're looking for from our communities. I wish everybody did it like Dayton. So 40 years of practice clearly has paid some benefits to us. But as public sector, we want your engagement in the advocacy work that we do. So if you have any questions, I know we're running out of time, but I would love to talk to you more if you're not familiar with both of these processes. The other type of advocacy that we do that I'll wrap up with is support for military members and their families. So creating this welcoming environment for those who give their lives for the well-being of the rest of us, we feel this is very unique in the country as well. You know, a military member isn't stationed in your community very long. They come and go typically on a 2-ish year rotation. And for their families, it's really difficult to assimilate. They're not there long enough to really get engaged. So by us creating an environment to present them with opportunities to get engaged with the community, help them get to know us through things like Hometown Heroes, the big hoopla that Amber mentioned earlier, Dayton Live, Dayton Art Institute, and others. It's a chance for them to really get to know us, and I think creates some stickiness because our region's focus on military friendly is a major reason why so many people, when they come up on retirement, if they're already here in Dayton, they choose to stay. If they're somewhere else across the country, they come back because they've had such a great experience here. So not exactly your typical advocacy, but I definitely lump it in the advocacy category because it's such an important component of how we, you know, tell the story of our community. So that was a lot. I covered a lot. I just really want to reiterate that economic development isn't successful unless we all work together. So I really thank you as elected officials and members of the public sector for the work that you do. Thanks for your partnership in our collective economic development work because, again, we are not successful unless we do it all together. So with that, thank you.